Let's get into some more Canon Films goodness. Let's do it. Hey, welcome back to my channel. Hope everyone is doing well out there. And that's right, folks. We are back in Canon Films territory, and it feels so good to be there. Today we're going to talk about Missing in Action 2, The Beginning. Now, this film had a weird genesis. I know I went over it a little bit in my Missing in Action review. And if you want to see that review, just scroll on down. I did that back in the beginning of December. Or go to my action movie playlist. You'll see it. It's on there. And I will do Missing in Action 3 eventually. That one's kind of hard to find. The Blu-ray is not really easy to get a hold of. It is available on Apple iTunes, which is nice. It's actually in widescreen because some of these films are in full screen, which I absolutely cannot stand, but such is life. Now, this film was originally intended, when Canon greenlit this film and Missing in Action, they shot these back-to-back, these films. Lance Hull directed this film. Joseph Zito directed Missing in Action, which this film was supposed to be the first film released. That was the intent when they greenlit these films. And then what we know is the first one was supposed to be the sequel. And if you ever watch this one, it makes total sense. But they decided, after editing both films together and viewing them, they realized that the film that they were going to make the sequel was the better film. So they released that one first, which made this one a prequel when this was released 4 months later. Now, the first film was released in November of 1984. This film was released in March of 1985. So there wasn't a big window between the release of these films. Now, this film, like I said, was released March 1st of 1985. It's rated R, hour and 40 minutes long, had a budget of $2.4 million, which is right around Canon's sweet spot back then in the early to mid-'80s. And when it was released, it grossed 10.7, so it was not as successful as the first film. They did make it, the third one didn't come out till 88, so it was 3 years later they released the third film finally, and Aaron Norris directed that one, Chuck Norris's brother. Now, Lance Hull had produced other films for Canon too. He produced 10 to Midnight, which I just reviewed a couple weeks ago. If you want to see that review, just scroll on down with Charles Bronson. He produced another Charles Bronson film, The Evil That Men Do, and the first Missing in Action film. Now, this film, Chuck Norris stars once again as Colonel James Braddock, and we have the always entertaining Steve Williams as Captain David Nestor. And Steve Williams was in Jason Goes to Hell. For all you horror fans out there, he was in Blues Brothers. He was on plenty of TV shows and bit parts. Steve Williams is always entertaining as hell when he's on screen. So it's always nice to see him pop up. Now, this film basically shows Braddock being in a prison of war camp. I remember seeing this when I was a kid, when it was on TV, and I was always confused because I didn't know this was a prequel. And I always wouldn't see the beginning, so I never had any context. I'd always catch it once they're in the camp. And I was always confused, like, why is he in the camp? Because I had seen the first film many times, because my dad had it taped off HBO on a VHS tape. So I was always confused by that. It wasn't until years later when I realized, oh, it's a prequel. So this shows how Braddock became a POW, broke out, and then that explains everything that happens in the first film. So we see this battle going on in the beginning of the film in Vietnam, obviously, and these men are under fire. And Braddock is on a helicopter with these men and decides they try to save these men or pick them up and get them out of there. And they pick up a few of them, the rest of them get killed, and as they're trying to fly away, they get shot down, and they get taken into custody and shipped to a prison work camp, where this general who's one of the biggest pricks and sadists I've ever seen on film, but he's fantastic. The actor who plays him is fantastic. And then we fast forward 10 years. So this movie starts in 1972, but when the movie picks back up, it's 1982. So these men have been there for 10 years. And they do a nice job of selling the toll that this hellhole has taken on these men. All these men look worn down, tired, kind of sickly, and basically at their wits' end. The one guy is kind of, you can tell he's on the verge of a mental breakdown. And the one gentleman has malaria. He looks in bad shape. The one that he seems to have his shit together the most is Braddock. But even Chuck Norris does a nice job of selling that the toll this place is taking on him. And the general of this place, all he wants is Braddock to sign this confession paper confessing to these war crimes on film, and he promises to let them go. Now, Steve Williams' character, Captain David Nestor, had already sold out, and he's working for the Vietnamese general in a capacity. So he's dressed in clean clothes. He's not suffering like the other guys, the other Americans at this camp. And there's Vietnamese prisoners as well in this camp as well. So, and the Americans are friendly with those guys, but the guards and this general are complete assholes. And we see the physical and the mental, psychological torture this general inflicts on these men. Very sadistic stuff. There's a scene where they hang Braddock upside down and put a sack on his head with this pissed off rat in it. In a very, very cool, well, not, I wouldn't say cool scene, but very visceral scene. There's a scene where the one guy who I said was on the verge of a mental breakdown, they take him up and they say they're going to execute him for his crimes against the Vietnamese government and the Vietnamese people. They put a gun to his head, and he's already crying, and when they pull the trigger, there's no bullet in there. And they say, oh, hold on, and they do it again. They do it like 3 or 4 times. And by the time they're done, this guy's almost on the verge of just losing his mind. Like, this guy plays psychological games as well with them. And he ends up escaping at one point, but we don't see him for a little bit of the film. He kind of goes into the jungle. We don't see him for a while. One guy gets out, crosses this bridge, and gets set on fire with a flamethrower by guards across the bridge. And then finally, Braddock, I'm going to fast forward through some things. Braddock escapes and goes into the jungle, but this is a Chuck Norris film, so obviously he's coming back for revenge, which he does. He starts taking out the guards, blowing up buildings. He frees his compadres and takes over this helicopter because this general is also running drugs with this other guy. And he has a helicopter. Well, they capture the helicopter, and Braddock stays behind to have one last fight with the general, and he ends up killing him. And that's the end of Missing in Action 2, The Beginning. And as we know, the first film picks up with Braddock in the States, still thinking about Vietnam, and then he gets talked into going back. This film definitely helps set up why Braddock has a chip on his shoulder to go back to Vietnam. It shows the struggle he had, the horrors he saw, and why he wants to go back and find more POWs, because he escaped from a POW camp. He knows there's more there, and the chip on his shoulder he has against the Vietnamese government and their military. So they do set up that nicely. And actually, Chuck Norris does a nice job in this film for what he's given to do. He shows the despair he's going through. He looks tired. They do a nice job with that. Now, this movie, I will say up right now, is not as good as the first film now. So I get why Cannon, when they edited these films together, decided to release what we know as the first film first. It was definitely the better film. And really the more action-oriented film, although that film has a large chunk of film where there is no action, but there's definitely more action in the first film. There's action in this film in the beginning battle, and then really we spend all of our time in this camp, mostly until the last act when Chuck Norris escapes and then comes back and starts taking revenge. And the final fight between him and the general is pretty good. But I will say the other action scenes aren't filmed as well as the first film. Joseph Zito definitely was the better director out of the two men that directed these films. Not that this film is awful, but the first film was definitely directed better. The action scenes were definitely directed better and better choreographed than this film. But the final fight is definitely good. So, you know, and the prick gets his comeuppance, which is what we want to see throughout this film. I want to see that guy die because he's such an asshole. And it happens. So in that respect, you know, you're cheering for Colonel Braddock to take revenge, and he does, and you know what's going to happen in these kind of films. That was always the standard MO for these films. But this film is still enjoyable. I always enjoyed watching this as a kid. I just bought the Blu-ray off Amazon for like, I don't know, $5.99 or $6.99. It's a film that I've watched here and there over the years. Now I have it on Blu-ray, so I'll probably watch it a little bit more often. It's a decent prequel for sure, and it definitely fills in a lot of the gaps for the first film, and we get more of what Colonel Braddock went through, what he saw, why he feels the way he feels. So in that respect, it does do a nice job with that and shows the horrors of what these men went through. So yeah, it's a decent prequel. It's not better than the first film, but it's not bad. It's definitely an enjoyable film. I would give it a 6.75 out of 10. A 6.75 out of 10 for Missing in Action 2. Have you ever seen this sequel? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video. I greatly appreciate it. I hope everyone's doing well out there, and I'll be back soon with some more content. See you later.